Sometimes the worst events turn out to be the best. It really just depends on how you use them and who you become through them. Life's interruptions take many forms. They can be marital meltdowns, financial meltdowns. But with each, there's an interruption to the things we take for granted. There's an interruption to the certainty, pattern interruptions. And it thrusts you right into not knowing what's going to happen next. Along with that, the fear of not knowing what's going to happen next. COVID has done this and more. In addition to the shock of having routines tossed out, the interruption has been system-wide, putting everyone on the same playing field, regardless of their role or status in society. My name is Dawna Jones. I've been a professional facilitator working in everything from strategy to team performance and personal and organizational transformation. Mostly tough and sticky, complex issues. Always issues a lot involve working with the underlying dynamics that make things stop or go on the surface. Around 2002, 2004, I was working with a team who had lofty ambitions for change when I sensed them roll back. Incremental results were the best they could get. I'm fortunate enough to have grown up as the daughter of a wildlife photographer, so I spent a lot of time in the bush because that's where a lot more things made sense. But it's also the place where you learn to absorb and sense how everything is interrelated and interconnected. It's more of a natural sensory experience. I was aware of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring warning about the loss of biodiversity. This was published in 1962. I worked with climate scientists in the early 80s who knew that we were heading for climate change but couldn't prove it with data. And of course, that made the politicians happy because by the time you get the data, it doesn't matter. If you put those two things together, I knew that we as a species were not evolving fast enough to thrive with the ecological changes that were underway. We also had technological changes on that, and we just weren't adapting quickly enough. So I decided to reconnect decision-making back to caring about planet and people, to really prepare humanity to meet the challenge of adapting to changing conditions, to engage business, to act responsibly as part of the living system, instead of trying to extract, exploit, control, destroy, or completely ignore it. Then came what I would call the interruption. In 2008, I lost it all. My home, my investments, which happened over time, it all crashed hard. The next 9 years, I was nomadic, and I emerged out of that experience with more or less an expanded consciousness. Really, it was a renewal and a restoration of a unifying way of seeing things, which brought me back home into a place that's more comfortable for me. It gave me the capacity to manage my emotional energy and focus, and it gave me the calm that crisis can teach if there's openness to learning and some humility around that. From my point of view, the coronavirus is a chance to learn those skills, but you can skip the homeless for 9 years part. Hopefully for humanity, it's been a humbling enough experience that we can all move forward with greater respect for the living system of interrelationships, for the biodiversity that permits resilience and our capacity to work with complexity and complex issues. Because with 7.8 billion people, we need to learn how to be better as a species, particularly with respect to all the other creatures around us, what we now unfortunately call resources. I'm going to start with the lessons dealing with the dark places, because you can appreciate from your own experience with the COVID pandemic that the shock takes some adjusting. I can talk about that with a lot of comfort today, but there was time spent in dark and difficult places. Because I have a natural instinct for seeing things differently, both depth perception and a wider view, it took a month or two to stumble on the key to how to work with feeling powerless, how to work with feeling some sense of hopelessness, and how to do better than barely cope, how to work with the conditions I was in. The pivotal point happened after watching the documentary of Ewan McGregor and Charlie Borman's A Long Way Down, a motorcycle trip they did from Scotland to the southernmost tip of Africa. I've been around the world twice. So when they talked about stopping off in a remote village in Africa at the invitation of the community, I had a very clear picture of what that scene looked like. They described how the villagers served them a rice dinner, which of course they knew would have meant that someone did not eat that week. But the villagers did it with grace, with generosity and trust. And that shifted my perspective from feeling anxious, sorry for myself, playing the why me tape. I switched my outlook to one of gratitude for what I was dealing with. And that stays with me, that agility, moving from one view to another, is something that you can use all the time in every situation. Perspective shifting, seeing things from a different angle. Second part of the dark zone is anxiety. And anytime I felt anxious, it was because I was being pushed or pressured to abandon my mission, my compelling drive to make things better. I was being pressured to conform. I tried to conform. It's not that I didn't try, I did. It just backfired epically. Most notably, I took a job in retail because I'd owned a retail store. I started one from scratch and had owned one. So I thought, oh, this will be fun. But a week later, I had a rash that made me look like something out of a horror show. Physically, I was beyond exhausted, and I'm used to having all sorts of energy available, but I would come back barely functional from a 4-hour shift. I realized that anxiety, as I experienced it, was where there was a tension between what I was being called to do and what I was not yet aligned with. So it really meant sticking with my purpose, staying aligned with my mission, not being pulled off in spite of the judgment, and there's a lot of quite brutal judgment, to fit into societal conditioning. Then there's fear. It's tricky because it can work for you to protect you, or it can work against you. It can stop you from reaching your potential and achieving your dreams, or it can help you take the next step in your life. It can fuel you forward. That's how it served me. It was fuel. Walking through it was the only way to do it for me. Yes, of course, you're scared, you're uncomfortable, but you gain some sort of comfort eventually with being uncomfortable. And I also learned there's ways to keep fit using fear. Fear has a tendency to contract, cause contraction. And so I had learned much earlier in my fitness training to continually work with the physical expansion, because that's really helpful at staying open. Focus was the second way to deal with fear. What am I paying attention to? What was wrong or could go wrong, or what was going on in the moment? It amounts to training your mind to focus on the moment that's immediately in front of you, as opposed to trying to jump into the future or live in the past and the way things were. It's called mindfulness now, but for me at the time, it was training my brain to stay on what was in front of me. And that was the best way for me to cope in the end. And then, of course, there's that thing called depression, which is a spiral down. Not the first time I'd hit depression. I had a patch before, and I realized it wasn't much fun. I'd learned to observe when my heart energy was going down and experimented with ways to restore that vitality. Exercise being one, even if it's just a short walk. That was easy. But it was also focused on the positive possibilities, training to gain new muscle memory out of things that would help my heart be at peace, that restored, rejuvenated. For me, that's being around animals, dogs, horses, nature. Everyone has something that's restorative. The other big thing with depression biologically is expression. Repression of expression creates depression or aggression. From an energy point of view, it's got to go somewhere. Best that you express, whether it's through writing, painting, photography, get the feelings out. I wrote Decision Making for Dummies on the road. I wrote chapters for The Intelligence of the Cosmos and for From Hierarchy to High Performance and Huffington Post. Lots of writing, podcasting. Connection is the other huge part of it. I spent a lot of time trying to find other people in the world who cared about the same things I did, where there'd be some sense of belonging. Not looking for tribe here. There seems to be some confusion between tribe and sense of belonging. People that shared a common goal. To tie that together, this is about self-care, self-management, managing your emotions, working with your emotions in the moment, even if you can't see why you should. It's commitment to a giant goal that's bigger than you. It's got to be bigger than you, otherwise why bother? Secondly, shifting perspective. That has to do with the role of diversity in your decision-making and seeing the bigger picture, and it helps give you put things in perspective, see a different way, a wider way of looking at it. Exercise, I've been using Qigong, yoga, walking, anything to keep the body moving, basically. Focusing on positive possibilities, expression in heart renewing activities, and of course, connection to what matters. Going forward then, there's some lessons that we can draw from COVID. It's really a teacher for a lot of things in order to co-create the future. It's about learning. The gift of any interruption is to expose patterns, habits, defaults that you go to when you're barely coping. It's the chance to move from coping to rising above the adverse condition you're in, to broaden perspective and use your energy wisely and be true to yourself, no matter what. I know that's probably the harder course, but it's definitely the better one. Systemic change is exciting in the sense that COVID has shown us the underbellies of food delivery systems, of a lot of things. It has pretty much the same characteristics and consequences as climate change. Disrupted personal lives, exposed all sorts of areas where we're not resilient enough. It exposed how politicians and many others make decisions, where they go to with their fears. And it's also reconnected people to what matters in their lives, which has been quite a beautiful thing to witness. As a teacher and as a trainer for how to handle climate change, it doesn't get better. It's immediate, it's in our face. We have a chance then to use these kinds of crises to train ourselves to flow with them instead of reacting with fear and coming up with all sorts of theories on why this is not our responsibility or not an opportunity. We've got a chance in front of us to mitigate the effects of climate change, to give some chance to restoring biodiversity, some way of respecting all life. Whether we collectively achieve that or not, at minimum, you gain an inner sense of calm control in chaotic situations, which you can use in any part of your life. The planet is a living system of complex interactions. It always has been. It's not simple in that sense. It's not straight cause and effect. Business and many decisions all have assumed that everything is a resource to be tossed away, extract, use it, and get rid of it. That includes human resources. We saw that with companies that fired their people immediately as an expedient decision, but not a smart decision. The use of wildlife as resources has an implication on civilization in the long run. The air, water, soil quality, that's one thing COVID really showed, is what's our impact on the planet. The cost is human well-being, the vitality and the resilience of all life support systems. Companies, too, are complex adaptive systems, a very complex set of relationships. How an organization is run, managed, and how decisions are made, when it ignores humanity, it ignores the central fuel that runs the entire operation. When you move forward now with your life, what do you want to leave behind from life before COVID? And what do you want to keep? What do you want to strengthen going forward in the future? What connections do you want to nurture and strengthen, whether it's with meaning, values, people, whatever that link will be? What do you want to actually let go of so that you can be aligned with your heart's aspirations and with yourself? My name is Dawna Jones. Thank you for being with me.